the 1930s. America faced tough times. The stock market crash of 1929 had sent shockwaves through the economy, leading to widespread unemployment and poverty. Families struggled to make ends meet, and the future seemed uncertain. The Great Depression gripped the nation. Bread lines and soup kitchens became common sights as people sought any means to survive. The once thriving cities now bore the scars of economic collapse. Jobs were scarce, money was tight, factories shut down, and the streets were filled with jobless men searching for work. The American dream seemed like a distant memory. And then, the Dust Bowl struck. A series of severe dust storms ravaged the Great Plains, turning fertile land into barren wastelands. The skies darkened as massive clouds of dust swept across the region. Imagine a giant cloud of dust stretching for miles. It blotted out the sun, making day look like night. The dust was so thick that it seeped into homes, covering everything in a fine layer of grit. It swallowed homes, farms, even entire towns. Families were forced to abandon their land, leaving behind everything they had worked for. The dust storm showed no mercy. This wasn't a nightmare. It was a reality for millions in the American Midwest. The relentless dust storms caused respiratory problems, and many people fell ill. Life became a daily struggle for survival. The Dust Bowl was an ecological disaster. The once lush farmlands were now barren and lifeless. Crops failed and livestock perished. The land could no longer sustain the people who depended on it. It lasted for almost a decade, from the late 1920s to the 1930s. Year after year, the dust storms continued, leaving a trail of devastation in their wake. The impact was felt far and wide. The land, once fertile, turned into a dust bowl. Soil erosion and poor farming practices had stripped the earth of its nutrients, making it impossible to grow crops. The landscape was forever changed. This wasn't just a natural disaster, it was a man-made catastrophe, exacerbated by years of overplowing and unsustainable agricultural practices. The consequences were dire. Human actions played a big part. The relentless pursuit of profit had led to the exploitation of the land, with little regard for the long-term effects. The Dust Bowl was a harsh lesson in environmental stewardship. This is the story of the Dust Bowl, a stark reminder of our power to harm the environment and the importance of respecting the delicate balance of nature. It serves as a cautionary tale, urging us to learn from the past and protect our planet for future generations. The Dust Bowl didn't happen overnight. It was a catastrophe that built up over years, a slow-moving disaster that crept up on the unsuspecting farmers of the Midwest. It resulted from a combination of factors, both natural and man-made. The interplay of these elements created a perfect storm of environmental degradation. A severe drought hit the Midwest in the 1930s, one of the worst in recorded history. The rains that once nourished the land became a distant memory. Rain was scarce and the land dried up. The once fertile soil turned to dust and the crops withered under the relentless sun. But the drought alone wasn't the only problem. Human activities had set the stage for this environmental disaster long before the skies dried up. For years, farmers had been practicing intensive agriculture. They were driven by the promise of bountiful harvests and the need to feed a growing nation. They plowed vast areas of land, removing the natural grasses that held the soil together. These grasses had evolved over millennia to anchor the soil and retain moisture. These practices left the soil exposed and vulnerable. Without the protective cover of grasses, the soil was at the mercy of the elements. When the drought hit and the winds blew, the loose topsoil turned to dust. The winds picked up the dry soil and carried it away, creating massive dust storms. Millions of tons of it were lifted into the air, creating the infamous black blizzards. These storms blotted out the sun and buried homes and fields under layers of dust. The economic hardship of the Great Depression worsened the situation. Farmers were already struggling to survive, and the Dust Bowl pushed them to the brink. Farmers, desperate to make ends meet, continued to plow and plant, further damaging the already depleted soil. They had no choice but to keep trying to grow crops, even as the land failed them. Their plight was a harsh lesson in the interconnectedness of human actions and environmental health. The Dust Bowl stands as a stark reminder of the consequences of unsustainable farming practices and the delicate balance of our ecosystem. The Dust Bowl was a human tragedy, a period of severe dust storms that greatly damaged the ecology and agriculture of the American and Canadian prairies during the 1930s. Millions of people in the affected regions faced unimaginable hardship. They were forced to leave their homes, their farms, and their communities, seeking refuge wherever they could find it. The dust storms were relentless, turning day into night. People struggled to breathe as the air was filled with fine particles of dust. The storms would sweep across the plains, leaving a trail of destruction in their wake. The dust infiltrated everything, coating homes, food, and lungs. It was impossible to keep the dust out, no matter how hard people tried. It seeped through the tiniest cracks and crevices, making everyday life a constant battle. Respiratory illnesses were rampant, especially among children and the elderly. Hospitals were overwhelmed with patients suffering from dust pneumonia and other respiratory conditions. The health crisis added another layer of suffering to an already dire situation. The dust storms buried crops and livestock, leaving farmers with nothing. Fields that once produced bountiful harvests were now barren wastelands. The economic impact was devastating as families lost their primary source of income and food. Families were forced to abandon their homes, their livelihoods, their entire way of life. They left behind everything they had worked for, driven by the hope of finding a better future elsewhere. They packed what little they could carry and headed west, hoping for a better life. The journey was long and arduous, filled with uncertainty and danger. Many traveled in old, unreliable vehicles, often breaking down along the way. These migrants, often called Okies after the many who came from Oklahoma, faced discrimination and hardship on the road. They were met with suspicion and hostility in the places they sought refuge, struggling to find work and shelter. They were a testament to the human cost of environmental disaster, their stories etched in the history of the Dust Bowl. Their resilience and determination in the face of such overwhelming adversity remain a powerful reminder of the strength of the human spirit. Section 4, The Land Wounded. The Dust Bowl wasn't just a human tragedy, it was an environmental catastrophe. The relentless dust storms stripped the topsoil, leaving the land barren and infertile. The ecological balance was disrupted. Wildlife populations plummeted as their habitats disappeared under a blanket of dust. Rivers and streams dried up, adding to the desolation. The dust storms didn't stop at the borders of the Dust Bowl region. The fine dust particles traveled thousands of miles, reaching as far as the East Coast and even across the Atlantic Ocean. The Dust Bowl left an indelible mark on the landscape, a stark reminder of the interconnectedness of ecosystems and the devastating consequences of environmental neglect. Section 5, Nature's Harsh Lesson. The Dust Bowl was a harsh lesson for humanity. It showed us the immense power of nature and the dire consequences of our actions. We learned that we are not above nature, but an integral part of it. The Dust Bowl forced us to rethink our relationship with the land and soil. It highlighted the critical importance of sustainable farming practices that protect the soil and conserve water. The disaster led to the creation of the Soil Conservation Service, a government agency dedicated to helping farmers implement sustainable practices. It was a turning point in our understanding of soil erosion and the urgent need for conservation. Section 6, Preventing Future Dust Bowls. Can we prevent another Dust Bowl? Yes, we can. We have learned from the mistakes of the past. Today, we have a better understanding of soil conservation and sustainable agriculture. We need to continue promoting these practices, encouraging farmers to adopt methods like crop rotation, no-till farming, and cover cropping. These methods help to protect the soil, conserve water, and prevent erosion. We need to address climate change. Global warming is increasing the risk of droughts, making regions like the Dust Bowl more vulnerable to desertification. Reducing greenhouse gas emissions is crucial for preventing future Dust Bowls. Section 7, Our Future, Our Responsibility. The Dust Bowl is a reminder. It reminds us that we are interconnected with nature. Our actions have consequences. We must treat our planet with respect. We have the knowledge and the tools to prevent another Dust Bowl. We need the will to act. Let's learn from the past and create a future where we live in harmony with nature, ensuring a healthy planet for generations to come. The Dust Bowl serves as a solemn reminder that the delicate balance of nature can be disrupted with devastating consequences. Our future depends on our ability to learn from these events, adapt our practices,